I'm a former Mormon who went through the secret Mormon temple ceremonies, and now I'm sharing my experience and talking about exactly what happens in Mormon temples. I'm doing this first and foremost because I care about informed consent, and I wish that the church had prepared me for what was going to happen before I went through. In the previous videos, I talked about what happens during Mormon temple endowment ceremonies, and now I'm going to answer the most frequently asked questions on those videos. As always, if you are a Mormon and seeing this would make you feel upset or offended in any way, please don't watch. This was one of the most asked questions. When people go back for a session, is it the exact same thing? And a lot of people wanted to know, how often do you go and why do you go multiple times? When you go through a Mormon temple endowment ceremony for the first time, you are going through for yourself. So in other words, you are learning those things and making those covenants for you. But Mormons believe that in order to make it to the highest level of heaven, you have to go through these ceremonies. But they want everybody to be able to go to the highest level of heaven. So after people die, they take their names and people go through the temple and do these ceremonies for those people by proxy. So after you've gone through for yourself, you're supposed to go back and do it again multiple times for other people. Mormons believe that in the afterlife, these people will have the opportunity to either accept or reject the ceremony. That's one of the reasons that the Mormon Church is so into family history, because they want to have the names of everybody who ever existed so they can do these ceremonies for everybody that ever existed. Also, when you go through the first time, you do your initiatory and then your endowment session together. But when you go through subsequent times for other people, they're separate. So you might go to the temple and just do initiatories or just do an endowment ceremony. As far as how often you do it, there's not like a rule that says how many times you need to go or how often. The church encourages members to go to the temple as often as they feasibly can. I would say that the average active practicing Mormon probably goes 5 or 6 times a year. I would say that when I was Mormon, I went more like twice a year, just because for most of my time as an adult in the church, I was either pregnant or had a little baby. I would also say that it's not uncommon for Mormons to go once a month if they can. And if you're really Mormon and trying your very hardest and you're really devout, you might go even more often than that. My dad once went every single week for an entire year. But there's no hard and fast rule about how often you need to go. Somebody asked, because the temple ceremony is so long, when I used to go, it was 3 hours long, what happens if you need to go to the bathroom? And this is really terrible. I hate this, but they stop the entire ceremony and everybody just sits there and waits for you to get back. I think that I would have rather peed my pants than make everybody stop and just sit there while I go to the bathroom. So I always went before and made sure that I never needed to pee in the middle of a ceremony. A lot of people asked about what to do about loved ones who are members of the church who may be eventually going to go through the ceremony, or how do you help people see that this is a cult, things like that. And I hate to tell you this, honestly, but there's really not much you could do. Members of the Mormon Church typically feel very strongly about their beliefs. And somebody saying negative things about their church feels like a personal attack on them, even if you were doing it in the most kind-hearted way. I've said before that I wish that somebody had told me what was going to happen in the temple before I went through, but the truth is, if some random person tried to talk to me about that, I would have shoved my head in the sand and not wanted to hear a word about it. And then I probably would have never wanted to speak to that person again, because I would have been so upset by the disrespect of them trying to tell me temple secrets. What I really wish is that the church had informed me about what was going to happen. The sad reality is that when you strongly believe in the church, somebody trying to tell you anything negative or anything red flag about the church probably is going to make that person shut down. Probably the majority of people who have left the church will tell you that people only leave the church when they're ready to look into it on their own. Most likely, if you try to tell them negative things about the church or warn them about stuff, they're going to dig in their heels and resent you. So it really can end up damaging relationships. It's very sad. A lot of people asked if I have a new religion now or if I still believe in God. I'm not part of a new religion. I don't believe in God. I would call myself agnostic atheist. I would love if there was something more after we die. I would love if there was a reality in which I get to be with my loved ones again. That doesn't mean I'm asking about it. I'm not. But no, I'm not a part of any other religion. And seriously, I'm not looking. Somebody asked if Mormon church services are normal. So all of those ceremonies that I talked about are stuff that only happens in Mormon temples. The regular Mormon church buildings that you see are pretty much just regular churches. They have a regular Sunday service. They don't have a preacher, but they have a pulpit and they have somebody that gets up and talks. What they do typically is they ask members of the congregation if they'll get up and give talks about specific topics. They also have a sacrament service and they sing hymns. Somebody asked if ex-Mormons get in trouble for talking about these things. When I say I'm an ex-Mormon, I mean that very literally. I had my name removed from the records of the church because I didn't want to be associated with them anymore. So officially, because I'm not a member, there's nothing they can do to me. If I was still a member of the church, they could and probably would excommunicate me for talking about this. Obviously, though, just because I'm not a part of the church and the church can't officially reprimand me, it doesn't mean that I'm immune from the social repercussions. I have friends that no longer speak to me. I have relationships with Mormon family members that are just not the same. My husband's family has disowned us. And if you've spent any time going through my comment sections, Mormons can be very mean. But officially, no, the church cannot get me in trouble. Somebody asked if my husband and I are still married and if he left the church. Yes, he did. We both left the church together and we're coming up on our 12th anniversary. Somebody asked if Joseph Smith started all of these rituals. Technically, yes, but he stole them from the Freemasons. Joseph Smith became a Freemason, and then like a few weeks later, he was like, hey, I have this great idea for stuff we're going to do in the temple. And thus the endowment ceremony was born. Somebody asked if you're expected to remember all of the tokens and handshakes and things like that. No, not really. You will always have a temple worker there to help you if you can't remember stuff, but they can be rude. There were times that I went through that I felt like they were so heavily judging me because I couldn't remember all of the tokens and the handshakes and stuff. And nobody ever like outright said anything rude to me, but it was like the vibe. You know what I mean? A lot of people were like, loud laughter is a sin. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was part of the temple ceremony. You would go through the temple and you would covenant against loud laughter and other sins. However, most people just kind of ignored that part, and they did actually remove it from the temple ceremony, so it's not there anymore. Somebody asked if Mormons still believe that talking about this stuff is a sin, and yeah, they do. Part of the temple ceremony is that you promise God that you will not reveal what happens in the temple ceremony. So basically, if you do that, you are breaking a promise with God and sinning against him. Somebody asked if women only go through this temple ceremony when they're about to get married, and if they're allowed to be in the prayer circle without a man. So a woman usually in the church is going through the temple ceremony so that they can be married in the temple. However, that's not the only time that you could. Women also go on missions, so you would go through if you're going to go on a mission. And there are other like special circumstances where a woman might go through the endowment ceremony, but she's not getting married or going on a mission. It would depend on like your bishop and stake president to judge, and you would ask like, I feel like I'm ready to go through. Can I go through? And they would talk to you about that. And you don't need a man to be in the prayer circle. In the prayer circle, you just need an even number of men and women, but you don't have to be in a relationship with that person. So you can be totally single and go to the temple by yourself and participate. Somebody asked, why would I expose what is sacred to others like this? And what did the church do to you? First of all, just because something is sacred doesn't mean that it has to be a secret. I know that the church teaches it that way in general, that when something is really sacred, it has to be kept secret. But that's not normal. Most religions have things that they consider to be very sacred, but they're still open for people to learn about and hear about and see. I would have had a better experience going through the temple if the church had prepared me better. I genuinely believe that. I didn't have a good experience. But if the church had prepared me, I think that I would have had a happy spiritual experience because I would have known what was coming. I think informed consent is important. And what did the church do to me? Apart from not giving me informed consent, they whitewashed their history. They lied about and hid some very important aspects of the religion. They made me feel like I was the bad guy for asking questions. They made me believe that I had to give them 10% of my income or I wouldn't be with my family in the afterlife. They made me feel tremendous guilt and shame for being a regular person, among a plethora of other things. Here's the thing. If people want to be Mormon and they want to go to the temple and they want to participate in these ceremonies, I will literally fight for your right to be able to do that. But I believe that you should know what you're signing up for before you do.